For this week's history video, I'd like to assess what did the New Deal really accomplish. This is a central, fundamental question that dominates our politics today. The assumption has been, at the end of World War II, that the New Deal worked, and that it stopped the Great Depression, rolled back unemployment, and that Roosevelt was the hero who saved the United States. And it's partially true, but partially untrue, and we need to focus on the parts that are untrue to understand it. The fact is that the recession, the Great Depression under Roosevelt, had a flow much like a suspension bridge, a U. The unemployment rate was very high, then it dropped. Then around 35 and 36, it stabilized. Then in 37, there was a new recession, and the unemployment rate rose again. Morgenthau, who was the Secretary of the Treasury for the 8 years of the first two Roosevelt terms, told the House Ways and Means Committee, "I say after 8 years of this administration, we have just as much unemployment as when we started. We have tried spending money. We are spending more than we ever have spent before, and it does not work," unquote. By the way, this is from a book by Garland Tucker III called Conservative Heroes. That's little pithy biographies of a bunch of really interesting folks throughout history. And the point that Morgenthau makes is true. In 1939, when the war began, the unemployment rate was at about 22%, about what it had been when FDR took office. So in the first Roosevelt term, he brought the economy up and unemployment down, and really did save this country from revolution, I believe. But then in the second term, the policies he'd enacted began to backfire, caused a new depression, and he was helpless in the face of it, because it was his policies that had caused them. Arthur Schlesinger Jr., in his three-part series on the New Deal, really divides it into three areas: relief, recovery, and reform. Well, in the area of relief, the New Deal did a fine job. There were relatively few public works jobs or government-subsidized employment during the Hoover administration. And they instituted WPA, where my mother taught English, and it was a program where the government would subsidize people doing sometimes useful, sometimes useless public work. Then there was also the PWA, headed by Harold Ickes, that built some very important projects like Hoover Dam and the FDR Drive in New York and a lot of other stuff that was also government funded. And on top of that, there were major increases in relief payments and welfare payments and so on. And that alleviated a lot of the misery, and with the increased buying power, the economy did begin to come back. But then there's the second part, recovery. And at that, he failed completely. And the reason he failed, I believe, and Amity Shales, who wrote a great book called The Forgotten Man, was the third part of the conundrum, reform. Because in 1933, Roosevelt took office, and in 34 and 35, he passed a sweeping series of reforms, of new legislation, trying to change the American system so there would not be depressions of this magnitude in the future. They created the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission. They regulated minimum wage and hours, the massive program of farm subsidies, the National Recovery Administration, NRA, which sought to raise prices and raise wages. It institutionalized unionization and gave unions tremendous rights. Social Security that imposed a new tax on workers, but that started in 36, but the benefits didn't flow until 41, because Roosevelt wanted to amass the fiction that there was a trust fund that was paying these benefits, so it would not appear to be welfare. All of those changes put together so unsettled the economy, gave businessmen such a floating target where they had no idea what the situation would be next year or even next month. And as a result, business investment stopped, the recovery stopped, and a new depression, the Roosevelt recession, they called it, set in. And that's exactly what's been happening with Obama. The measures that he's instituted, healthcare reform and the Dodd-Frank bill and all kinds of stuff, whether you like it or not, has completely paralyzed American business. They don't want to invest in anything because God knows what the EPA is going to rule I can't do tomorrow. And as a result, business investment has basically stopped or slowed down, and our economy is not recovering. So the lesson of the New Deal is that you can do relief, and it's useful, it's important. No just let people starve. But in order to do recovery, you have to postpone reform. Thanks for watching.